In this video, you will learn how to find equivalent fractions. As long as you multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same whole number, you will generate an equivalent fraction. Let's start with 2/6. As long as we multiply 2 and 6 by the same whole number, we will generate an equivalent fraction. Let's pick any whole number, like 5. 2 times 5 gives us 10. And 6 times 5 gives us 30. So an equivalent fraction for 2/6 would be 10/30. Let's generate another equivalent fraction for 2/6. Now we can try another whole number. Let's say 3. As long as you multiply the numerator and denominator by that same whole number, you will generate an equivalent fraction. 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 times 3 is 18. So we started with 2/6 and we generated two equivalent fractions, 10/30 and 6/18. Let's try another one. Here we have 4/10 and we want to generate two equivalent fractions. We can pick any whole number. Why don't we pick 10? We'll multiply our numerator and denominator by 10, and 4 times 10 gives us 40, and 10 times 10 gives us 100. So 4/10 is equal to 40/100. We could try another one. Let's multiply by 5. 4 times 5 is 20, and 10 times 5 is 50. So we started with 4/10 and we generated two equivalent fractions, 4/100 and 20/50. There are so many more we could have chosen depending on which whole number we chose to multiply the numerator and denominator by. Now that you know how to generate equivalent fractions, let's try to rename a pair of fractions as a pair of fractions with common denominators. Right now we have 2/4 and 5/8. And if you take a look at the denominators, they are not the same. One is fourths and one is eighths. When we say common denominators, common means the same. So we want to change these two fractions into fractions that have the same denominator, but are also still equal to 2/4 and 5/8. So the first thing you do is think about, what do 4 and 8 have in common? Start counting by 4 and counting by 8 and pick something that they have in common. So if we have 4, 8, 12, I'm going to stop there and I'm going to start listing some 8s. 8, 16, 24. I already see that they both have 8 in common. So when I rewrite these fractions, I'm going to make sure that they both have a denominator of 8. I want both of my fractions to have a denominator of 8, so I'm going to set them up like this. 5/8 already has a denominator of 8, so you don't need to change 5/8 at all. But we do need to change 2/4. We want to change the denominator to 8. Right now, our denominator is a 4, so you have to ask yourself, what do you have to do to a 4 to turn it into an 8? And that would be multiplying it by 2. And remember, whatever you do to the denominator, you have to do the same thing to the numerator in order to generate an equivalent fraction. So 2 times 2 gives us 4. So we turned 2/4 into an equivalent fraction of 4/8, and now these two sets of fractions have the same denominator. We have 4/8 and 5/8. Let's try another example. Here we have a pair of fractions, 1/2 and 3/5, and we want to change them to be a pair of fractions that have the same denominator. Right now, we have denominators of 2 and 5, so they are not common. They're not the same. So the first thing we have to do is list our 2's and list our 5's and find something they have in common. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Let me start listing my 5's. 5, 10. I already see something they have in common. They both have 10. Now I want to change those two fractions to have a denominator of 10. So I wrote my fractions as having a denominator of 10, but we have to ask ourselves what we do to the denominator to make it a 10. So 1/2, our denominator is 2. 2 times what gives you 10? Well, that would be 5. So I have to do the same thing to the numerator in order to generate an equivalent fraction. 1 times 5 is 5. Now let's work with 3/5. What do I have to do to 5 to make it a 10? Well, I would have to multiply it by 2, and I have to do the same thing to the numerator to make it an equivalent fraction. 3 times 2 is 6. So we changed 1/2 to 5/10 and 3/5 to 6/10. So now these two fractions have the same denominator. Thank you for watching my video. I hope it helped. Check out my Teaching Exchange classroom for worksheets and centers, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos.